So let's dive right into the pizza in our demo. Brian, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thanks, John. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Just as an introduction, Robbie, engineer extraordinaire from Ivanti, works on the bed and sled team. Lots of experience with the identity director and automation products. So Robbie will be leading most of the demo today. So I'd like to thank him for his time and his preparation and everything that we've been going on to get this going. So let's go to the next slide. For those of you who haven't worked with NCSI in the past, just kind of give you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Don't want to spend much time here, but notice that we've got a lot of different vendors that we work with. You know, quite a significant stack of vendors in a lot of different spaces, from security, from IT service management, to operations, to back-end infrastructure, all the different components there. Just want to highlight, you know, today we're focusing primarily on Ivanti. One of the things that makes NCSI a little bit different is we believe strongly in long-term relationship with our customers, and we're always willing to sacrifice today to make sure that a customer is happy tomorrow and 5 and 10 years from now. And several customers that I can see in the attendee list have been customers going on a decade with NCSI. And I think if you were to ask them, they would tell you one of the reasons that they've done that is because of the partnership. And you know, one of the things that we offer from a partnership perspective is our concierge service, where you know you have a problem or an issue or something that you need some support with. We've got a dedicated concierge person who will take that phone call, take that email, and then go get the solution, whether it's an internal engineer that can support you, whether it's going to support with help with the factory tech support. All of it is there, and it's one of the things that makes NCSI unique, and one of the reasons NCSI has won either Ivanti's Partner of the Year or Services Partner of the Year each of the last 4 years. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Robbie. What we wanted to focus on today is the identity product called Identity Director. Now, it actually comes in 2 flavors, Identity Director, and then there's a subcomponent of that called the automation. And a lot of Ivanti customers get automation to integrate with Ivanti solutions. So if you wanted to connect Service Manager over to Endpoint Manager or other things, you can do that with the automation. The Identity Director steps that up significantly, and we can get to lots of capabilities. And Robbie will show you a lot of these, but I just want to talk about some of the things that come through with this, right? Access control. Being able to go through and control access as we take and move people in and out of the organization or throughout the organization, right? And be able to control what access they have and make sure that when they need access, they've got that access, and when they no longer need that access, we're taking that away to work through that. And doing that in an automated fashion. Sure, anyone who's worked in a service management platform understands that we have workflow that will go through and create all these tasks and assign it out to all these people to go through and do things. But the weakest link in any of that is the people that are involved. We all make mistakes. We forget to do things. We don't get to follow through. We don't complete the tasks or whatever it happens to be. And then those things become audit findings that weren't done correctly and all of that kind of stuff as well, right? And so the automation is going to help us in a lot of these different components, and being able to drive it through self-service, right? Be able to go through and talk about all the different capabilities that we do from a user being able to say, I need access to this, their manager approves it, and then the automation takes it from there. And this is all of what Identity Director does. And most importantly, it helps us with our governance, making sure that we're compliant, that we're able to go through and prove to our auditors all of that kind of stuff, that we're doing things, and making sure that we're secure and all of the different components associated with that. So Identity Director is going to help us in a lot of those different cases. Now, for any of you who's not familiar, Identity Director came to Ivanti through an acquisition of Res Software. Res, prior to the acquisition with Ivanti, worked with lots of different applications and lots of different things that are out there. Right, Robbie, if we can go to the next slide. There's all kinds of actions that we can go through and do and work with that, but we can also integrate to lots of applications in the marketplace, from virtualization to cloud platform to IT service management. Sure, we can integrate with Ivanti Service Manager, but not everyone has that. So we also can integrate with other applications in the service management space, as well as into mobility, right? Being able to integrate to mobility platforms, other software, PC lifecycle platforms, the integration is what makes this tool so powerful to be able to go and connect to all the different applications that we have that are working with that. So we have some examples of some of the connectors and things that we can do. First, we're going to look at some of the actions that we can do in a process. Here's just 300 of the out-of-the-box tasks that come. What can we do to automate, right? Just a couple of those. You'll see in the virtualization, VMware ESX virtual machine configuration. You can then just look over a little bit, SMMP trap, an SQL statement, and looking a whole bunch of things for Mac. And then if you go look over onto the configuration side of it, we've got product and printer and registry and TCP/IP, Windows Shell configuration, provisioning, getting into Active Directory, Citrix, resource capabilities. All of this is stuff out of the box that we can get with Identity Director to go help us automate things throughout our organization as we go. And then the next slide here just goes through and starts talking about, here's just some example connectors that we have. This is just one folder within all of the connectors that are here, where we can go through and get into, Citrix Zen Server to VMware ESXi and app volumes to vCenter, and being able to go through and create and do snapshots and do all this kind of stuff that's right in that automation side of it. So a user can go in and request a virtual machine, and that virtual machine can be spun up through that request process. They get a link to where that is, then it goes through and gives them an expiration time for that the virtual machine and all that kind of stuff. So very powerful capabilities within just the built-in native connections that are there. One of the common things that we get from customers, I would say our #1 request from our IT service management customers is onboarding and offboarding of employees, right? We have so many of that that's coming through from, what do they need access to, and then what do they have access to that we need to make sure that we get rid of those access when they leave the company. And so onboarding and offboarding is what we wanted to focus on for the demo that we're going to kind of talk through. So we've got a lot of different capabilities, and we'll continue to fresh through some of those and as Robbie goes through, but onboarding and offboarding and a lot of the different automation, kind of the key components on there. So Robbie, if you want to go ahead to the next slide and switch over to your demo, and I'll turn it over to you to kind of go through from there, and then we'll have questions. While Robbie's going through the demo, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A section, and we will address those either during the demo if it makes sense, or as we go through after, we'll go ahead and spend some time for Q&A.
Great, thank you, Brian. Well, thanks again, guys. And as Brian mentioned here, we're gonna start with some onboarding first, but what we're looking at currently right now is the web interface for Identity Director, and that's how it's accessed. It's just a regular Microsoft IIS instance, so there is no back-end servers to speak of really for Identity Director. It just requires a database and then an IIS instance. And it really acts as a service delivery platform and not necessarily just an identity management platform. So you can configure and deliver any type of services you want in your environment, and it's dynamically based on that user's identity. So a user that works in the mailroom isn't going to see virtual machine creation services. They're going to see services that are pertinent to their job role and what specific responsibilities and roles they have that they need to be concerned about. So, maybe they need to order envelopes or, more paper, things like that. They're not going to see financial access resources and things like that. And so let's jump over and onboard someone here. And the way that the onboarding works is that it interfaces with whatever HR system you have currently in place. So if it's just Active Directory you're using, or if you have PeopleSoft or anything else, it simply syncs with that, and then it can either read that a new record creation was made in your HR system and then start provisioning the resources required for that new user record, or you can actually delegate the capabilities to onboard a new user to maybe a low-level HR person through the web portal here without having to give them access to the PeopleSoft database, what have you. So let's go ahead and start here.
So, Robbie, a quick question's come up. It says if somebody has a catalog already in Service Manager or ServiceNow, does this replace that, or would this integrate with that?
It integrates. So this syncs data from wherever your sources of truths are, and if you already have, 10,000 users that already exist and all that data is already populated, it will merely import it here. It acts as a data warehouse. So if you don't have to start from scratch.
So let's go ahead and onboard, and hopefully he'll forgive me for putting his name on YouTube here, but Chad Johnson, one of our good customers, so he's on the webinar, so we're going to go ahead and onboard Chad.
So here's where we start defining a user's job role and their specific responsibilities. And what we've seen is that you can typically predict about 85% of the applications and resources that are required for a specific job role ahead of that user even starting employment. So we can pre-deliver the applications and resources that they need for their role and have them ready for them on day one when they first log into their system. So there's no, they've got like the base image and then they have to call the help desk and, hey, I need access to this drive and I need this software application. We know that they already need that based on their job role. So we can pre-deliver that, and this is where we start setting that up. So let's make Chad we're going to put him in the medical department, and we're going to put him in Radnor, Pennsylvania. And all of these fields are completely configurable based on your business process. They're not fixed by any means. You can have more or less. You can get very, very granular with the different definitions that specify where a user is, what building they're in, what floor they're on, what corner of the floor of that building that they're on. And then based on those definitions that we've set, you can provision resources to them. So, they need a printer. We're going to give them that printer because we know where they are. The compliance training, I'm not going to turn that on, but you can have like an annual computer security awareness training or something, what have you, and that would start nagging them or reminding them that they need to take that training. And then if they don't, you could remove rights from resources so they can't do anything on their computer other than take the compliance training. And so here's where we're going to actually define his job role. Let's make Chad a doctor. Why not? Who doesn't want to be a doctor, right? And so here's the employment duration, and this is equally, if not more important than the actual onboarding itself. So this is where we're going to define the workflow actions for their offboarding. So maybe you have 90-day interns and you don't really care about their mailboxes or their home directory. So at the end of that 90-day term for those interns, you just go ahead and using automation, delete their mailboxes and delete their home directories. But then maybe a full-time employee that gets terminated, you want to archive their mailbox and their home directory. Or a contractor, you want to do a different workflow and archive their mailbox but delete their home directory. Fully configurable, different workflows for different employment types, and you can also adjust any of these settings to fit your business needs. You're not stuck with what we have here. This is just what we've built in our demo environment. So let's set him up for 7 days because we're not sure if he's going to perform well as a doctor. And I'm just going to make up a dummy email address here, and that's it. So in this demo environment, that's all that's really required to actually onboard a user and start provisioning the resources required for his job role and responsibilities. So I'm going to jump over to our automation console. And the automation console is what actually does the heavy lifting here of that onboarding process. So this is kind of like the nuts and bolts of where it starts creating their Active Directory user objects, creating their mailbox, their home directory, putting them in the appropriate groups, all those different functions associated with onboarding a user. And Brian kind of touched on it earlier in the slide deck, but I think we're up to 350 out-of-the-box connectors now. The connectors are built in, and we have a development team that builds them and maintains them, and they're constantly growing and adding new ones, and it's usually customer driven. So if someone has a need for a connector and we don't have it, if it's something that we can reuse with, a wider customer base, then absolutely we will engage the connector team and get them to start the integration process and load it into the next release. Here's some of those virtualization options that we kind of went over earlier. And outside of the native connectors, if there is a web API, we can connect right into it very easily. So I have, knock on wood, cross my fingers, yet to see something that we haven't been able to integrate with, be it very old mainframe systems, Unix machines, anything. We can always connect to it and start provisioning tasks and integrations that we need to accomplish what we're trying to do here.
So there was a question that came through. It says, is there just generic API, or does everything have to be built by the Ivanti engineering? Can we just connect to a base API?
Absolutely. So that would be under the web service, and this is what that would look like. So you would just pull up your WSDL files, and then you could start building it out, and point it to the host, and you could specify a user account to connect to it, and what method you're using to connect to it. These pre-populate based on the WSDL config file that you would load. In our demo environment here, we've got a lot of integrations we've built out. So like Amazon, for instance, there was one service we built for a customer that we would query Azure and Amazon, and based on the pricing options for the different load times, 2 in the morning, maybe Azure's more cost efficient than Amazon is, and it would actually on the fly live convert the Amazon machine and move it over to Azure, all unknown to the users that are accessing the services hosted there. And then maybe during the day, it would actually move that machine back down to on-prem in vSphere so that they get faster access to it. And all automated, all scheduled. It's all hands-off. There was no involvement there from admins. Let's hop over to our onboard task here. So this is the job history list that we're looking at. And right here, this timestamp, this is when we first input that new user record. And it's actually already done. And you can see it took almost exactly 2 minutes to actually completely onboard that user. And you can see all the individual tasks that it did to actually get that user onboarded. So it, added it to the HR database, and then assigned the user manager to him, set his title, put him in the appropriate groups, created his home directory, set up his email account, and everything. I've got a user session pulled up. I'm going to save you guys the wonderful pain of watching me log in our demo environment. This is another test user here that I've already created. And it's in the same medical department, and he's a doctor as well. And so we're going to look at his version of his user portal because, again, it's dynamic based on his role. So this is the landing page. You can set announcements there, and you can have some featured services as well. But if we go over and look at his store, you'll see that everything available in his store is a little different than the one I had up earlier, which was like the admin portal. So you can see he has a lot of medical-related applications available to him. The ones with the check boxes mean that we've already delivered them to him as a service. So we know he's in the medical industry. We know he's a doctor. So he's automatically going to need these applications. So we've went ahead and pre-provisioned them for him. And I'll show you how we did that here when we jump over to the admin portal. But first things first, it's my first day, and I want to get Google Chrome installed so I can start wasting some time on the internet. So let's go ahead and request this via self-service. So very simple thing, install an application. Without automation, that's a phone call to the help desk. Somebody either has to remote the machine or send the ticket over to the SCCM team, and they'll have to assign it to them as a package resource. Or
the Ivanti endpoint manager team.
Correct. So automation actually natively connects into SCCM as well. I'll show you that real fast. So lots of people already have, large deployments of SCCM. We natively connect into it, so you don't have to start, moving packages over to automation. If you've already got it there, it will just query it, and you could pick the package that you want and then configure the deployment and then make it available in Identity Director for someone to request. So let's go and request a color printer. The color printer service actually has an approval built into it, since color toner is expensive, and his manager needs to approve that request for him to have that printer mapped for him. So let's say his manager is in San Francisco at a conference, right? So here's the manager at a conference listening to someone talk. He's got his iPad up. He sees the request notification come in. Your permission is needed. So Sam Merkel requested to have the color printer mapped. Please notify him that he is not permitted to print pictures of his cats. So we're going to go ahead and approve that printer mapping for him. And you can see in his status details that it shows it was waiting on his manager's approval. I approved it, so now the color printer is mapped. And he's got that service available to him now. But let's say that he also needs the prescription printer. Same kind of process there. Self-service requests. And again, if you didn't have Identity Director and automation, that would be a phone call to the help desk. The help desk guy probably doesn't have access to actually even map that secure prescription printer. So he would have to escalate a ticket to the prescription printer team, and then they would have to validate that that user actually has the rights to access that printer, and then they would have to go map it for them. All those different things, those are quantifiable cost savings by not even having to engage those actual people to do that task. With automation, you can just take care of it without any human interaction, and you'll actually even be able to create tickets, update tickets, and then close the tickets as well with automation. So you still get all of your ticket trackings and your SLEs that you can go way down because of that. So let's say that Chad is no longer interested in being a doctor and he wants to become a lawyer. So his manager is going to...
You don't know Chad very well.
No. So since I'm logged on with a different test user, we're going to go ahead and move him into legal. And again, is the same definitions here that we have preset for defining all of the rights and resource accesses available to a user. Let's make him a partner, full-blown lawyer. And again, that's going to kick off another set of automation tasks on the back end. And it's going to remove and return all of the medical resources and applications that were delivered to him, and then it's going to start assigning all of the legal applications and resources that are delivered to him. And lots of times what we see with role changes in environments is that they will get the rights and resources delivered to them for their new role, but they'll also still have rights and resources available to them from their old role. And that gets into kind of a gray, shady legal area depending on the job role that they have, because they can still reach back and touch into other departments that they shouldn't be able to have access to anymore. So again, it's going to reach out and update the HR database and then start removing him from the old groups, returning all of those resources back into the pool and removing the license assignments from them, putting them back in the available pool to be distributed to other users, all through automation, so no one actually even had to touch it. So this is the admin portal for Identity Director. So if we look at our list of transactions here, we can see where we onboarded Chad, and then our test user here, Sam. You can see that it's rolling through his role change right now, and it is delivering all of the legal resources to him and setting up the returns for his medical resource access as well. It's changing his department. Everything that was delivered to him is then being returned, and you get full life cycle tracking on that. So if we were to go and look at his user record, it would show the department change, would show all of the resources and rights that he had available to him prior to his role change, and then it's going to show the new resources that were delivered to him as well. So you get full life cycle tracking there. So let me show you the color printer, for instance, service delivery. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is a qualification, because the qualification is how we are able to dynamically display what's available to whom based on their job role. So for instance, this one, the Abu Dhabi color printer, the initial criteria is that you are in the Abu Dhabi location. But on top of just being qualified based on that location rule, you can also set a dependency as well as restrictions. So maybe if he works in the mailroom, we don't want him to have access to that. So we could set a dependency that he has to be in, the IT department or the legal department. So if he's in the mailroom, he wouldn't even see that option to even request that color printer. But you could further set restrictions. Maybe if he is in building B, he's still not allowed to get that color printer. So lots of granularity and control there over what's available to who based on different criteria sets. We can hop over here and look at the actual workflow. And the workflow is it's a very nice GUI-driven kind of drag and drop workflow that makes logical sense in terms of just kind of following how it actually runs through itself. It's top to bottom. So the delivery triggers, self-servicing is when someone actually requests it. The auto-provisioning trigger, that's that predictive delivery. So we know that if you're in the medical department, you're going to need access to medical records. So the qualification we would set, medical department, and then the service would be medical records, and then the auto provisioning. So that's how people would automatically get it.
So a question came in: is this conflict with a service management workflow, or is this just workflows that aren't people workflows?
No, it doesn't conflict with the service management workflows at all. It actually integrates with those and augments them.
So service management would be more like the people things when somebody has to do something. Identity Director and automation would be when systems have to do things, connecting to other applications, doing all the automated things that the people don't need to do.
Systems as well as users, absolutely. So the color printer, we have that approval built into it. So here's the approval, and you can set different approval requirements. So for the color printer, it was just the one manager that needed to approve it, but maybe if you have a restricted resource, you can have a quorum of approvals. So 3 out of 5 people need to sign off on it, and then if it's like, the master finance database or something, maybe you could have to have 5 out of 5 approvers need to sign off on it before someone can get access rights to it. And then you can also configure notes sections for the approval reasons or the rejection reasons as well. And you can create smart lists also for those approvers. So let's say that you have, a very fluid set of managers that are coming in, every 3 months you have different managers coming in and out. So you could create a smart rule that says, hey, if you're in this Active Directory group and in this specified department within the HR system, you're a manager for these 50 subordinates. So you're not constantly having to go back into the service and reconfigure it and specify a person that is the approver. Some of the other options you have here for the workflow actions, you can postpone a transaction. So, for instance, if someone requested local administrator rights to their workstation, that could go through an approval process, and then you could say, hey, we're going to approve this, but it's only going to be valid for that user for 1 hour. So you could do a postpone transaction, and that 1 hour clock would start ticking, and then the next step in that workflow would be to remove that user from the local administrators group as well. So lots of flexibility there with what you can do. You can call other services as well. So maybe as part of installing Visio, it's got a dependency on .NET, and so you could compare an attribute, look on a machine to see which version of .NET they have, and then if they don't have the correct version, you could call another service that actually installs the .NET version that's required, and then do that attribute comparison again, make sure that it actually does have the right version, it did successfully complete, and then continue on into the workflow. And then of course you can send messages to them as well all through the process, you know, hey, this successfully got installed. And with the mobile app, it's really nice if you're, you know, on your way into the office and you know, hey, I have this task I have to work on today. Oh, I need Microsoft Project. I know I don't have it installed. You could pull up the mobile app, request Microsoft Project to be installed for you, and then when you get to your desk, it's already installed. So you don't even have to pick up the phone, call the help desk, or, you know, wait for the hour and a half or however long it actually takes to install Project. It's just there waiting for you when you arrive. And the return delivery of that service is completely configurable as well. So if you have, you know, a license allocation set up, you could deliver, you know, 50 of Microsoft Visio, and once the 51st person requests it, it, you know, sends them a message, hey, sorry, we're all out of licenses. And then once someone either, you know, moves in a different department or they get let go, that license gets put back into the pool, and then it's available for someone else to request. So the return trigger options are when someone cancels the service. So they could actually go back into their service portal and say, hey, you know what, I don't need this anymore. And then it would automatically return that back into the pool. Or when they no longer qualify, so that would be one of those role qualifications. If they're in the medical department, they get the medical apps. When they move into a different role, they no longer qualify for it, so it's automatically going to get returned. Or when they're marked for deletion, when they get fired. Let's actually terminate our test user here. And again, these are fully configurable, but these different termination options will have different workflows associated with them. So contract not renewed, maybe we're going to archive all of his information, and then dismissed, we're definitely going to archive everything, but maybe laid off, we're not really concerned about. So you could have a different set of workflow options that are available as well. We're just going to delete everything for him. And again, these are all available through the mobile app. So if, you know, if there's an issue with someone who needs to be terminated immediately, any applications that were provisioned to that user when he was onboarded, maybe their cloud applications, some SaaS apps, some sensitive resource access rights, somebody could be on the road and get a phone call about it, pick up their phone and actually terminate that employee right there immediately. And that same 2 minutes that it took to onboard that user, it can offboard them in that same time frame as well. so that's going to start kicking off those automation jobs.
The question came in, if somebody, it was onboarded before the identity director was set up, how does it handle their termination?
It would handle it the same way. So when you're syncing into Identity Director from the sources of truth, it's going to know about that user and know about their job role. And then when you create the automation tasks, it's going to be able to reach out to your Active Directory or what applications were provisioned to that user, and then terminate them and remove their rights as well. In an existing environment, which is not a greenfield, you would simply be able to create some services in the beginning that kind of query all of the different applications and systems you have in your environment. So you could sync those in as well. So it's easy to look at AD and say, hey, here's XYZ user, but what does XYZ user actually have in terms of applications and rights resources? So you could create automation tasks that would just run out and examine that user and all the rights and resources he has, and it would pull that into Identity Director, and then it would still know everything about that user. So when you terminate them, it would still be able to go out and remove all those rights and accesses from that user.
Okay. A couple other questions that have come in. It says, if we wanted to use a base Windows image, could we push all required software to that machine? I would assume that means by role or by something there, or do we have to select each one individually?
So lots of times what we see is that people will, with Identity Director, they have the capability of building one image, loading all the software on it, and then you can restrict the rights to run different applications and then remove the visibility of that application as well. So when they hit the Start menu, if they're only entitled to see Microsoft Office, they're not going to see Visio and Project and Photoshop, right? Even though it's there and it's installed, they're not going to see it. But even if they're a smart user, dangerous user, same kind of thing there, they're going to go browsing through the program files directory, and maybe they're going to find Photoshop and try and run it. Since they're not entitled to actually have access to it, it's not going to permit them to run it.
Okay, great. Another question says, could a user have access to cloud services revoked if their password expires? And I guess at the same time, while you're answering that question, maybe we could talk about the password reset capability within the tool.
Absolutely. So that would just be a different workflow. So when their password expires, you could have an automation task that's just watching the Active Directory objects for expired passwords, and then as soon as it sees that expired password flag, then you could start triggering automation tasks to run out and start disabling cloud services for them. And to answer the question about the password reset capability, it's the Identity Director agent that you install on the endpoints. Very lightweight. I think it's in the neighborhood of 20 megabytes or something. It's really kind of notification level type interaction on the desktop. But the other component of that is the password reset functionality, which actually sits on the Windows logon screen as a little button there. And they're fully configurable. You can have them say anything you want. It doesn't have to say reset password. You can make it say, I forgot my password, whatever you want. But it gives you the ability there to click on that, and then you can configure the reset options to have either challenge questions, to have it send an SMS text with a PIN number. You can have it do the challenge questions and the PIN number. You could just have it get routed to a manager, and the manager would approve the password reset. A lot of different options there. And you can also do that from the mobile device as well. So if you're on your way to the office and you don't know your password, you forgot it, you went on vacation, it expired, you forgot it, you could request that password reset from the mobile device, and it would respond with the challenge questions and the PIN prompts, what have you, and it's reset for you when you get into the office. And that's another one of those quantifiable cost savings with help desk calls. I mean, how many password resets do help desks get daily. You know.
30% on average.
Right. So imagine completely eliminating that, you know, and that frees up your help desk staff to actually work on other projects that do require human interaction and not just repetitive, mundane tasks all the time.
Okay. I know we're getting kind of close to the end here, so I'm just going to shout out while we're doing this last little bit. If there's any other questions that people have, go ahead and put them into the Q&A section so we can give you some time to type those while Robbie's finishing up the last little bits of his presentation here.
Well, that's actually about it for my dog and pony show, believe it or not. So we successfully terminated our employee there. And you can see all of the applications and resources and rights he had were returned back into the system. And you get full auditing on that. So you can see Google Chrome came back. All of his lawyering access came back to him.
Okay. A couple questions come through. How is this licensed?
It's licensed off of named users. So if one user has 8 different devices, it's one license. It's based off the user.
Is that per employee or IT?
Whomever is logging into it and accessing the resources within it. So
okay.
If you don't want to make it available to a certain group, then you can just not have it available for that group to access.
Okay. Someone's asking if there's a cloud environment for this, or is it on-premise?
This is on-prem currently. I know that there is a cloud version in the works. It's essentially just going to be the same thing. It would just reach back into your systems for its sources of truth.
Okay. Can we see how the name information entered was turned into a unique login ID and email address?
Absolutely. So let's go back. That's an excellent question. So all of the data fields that we input wind up getting converted into what we call attributes, and the attributes get passed into the automation jobs, and they're set up as essentially variables. So this is kind of a deep dive question. So for instance, the departments show up as a list. Because those are conditional, and then those attributes from that list, federal job titles, here's a list. So here are the different federal job titles. In this instance, what you get displayed on the input screen are these friendly values, and then in the demo environment here, we're just using numbers, and then we're passing those numbers back into our HR database.
Okay, a couple more questions. Is there multi-factor authentication?
We fully support MFA, and we actually are leveraging IIS for authentication. So as long as your server hosting IIS is configured for MFA and the IIS application for Identity Director is configured to prompt for MFA, then you're going to get prompted for it. Smart cards, tokens, anything you want.
Okay, back on the question for the employee ID is how do we guarantee uniqueness?
There's a lot of different options there. So you can generate random numbers via automation. Typically, that's leveraged off of your existing HR system for employee numbers. Within Active Directory, it depends on how you configure the automation task that actually creates the AD object. So, if your business case is, we're going to do, Tom Smith and then Tom Smith 2, Tom Smith 3, or Tom middle initial Smith. I mean, depends on how you want to configure it. A lot of options there.
A lot of options there. Okay, good. Is there any machine learning to help with decision-making process as it's going through, learns over time?
Currently, no. I know that we've been getting some requests for that, so the development guys are kind of kicking around the idea of how they could implement machine learning and how it could be useful for different sections of it, but nothing currently.
Okay. Let's see, what does auditing or certification process review look like? Is there a way for a manager to review what access an employee has been given?
Absolutely. So there's a couple different options there. So with the acquisition, Ivanti has extraction, which is a whole other topic, but that is the new native reporting option for generating dashboards and views. But in terms of looking at actual users, let's look at, we can pull up Chad here. So if we wanted to pull up a user and see what that user was actually entitled to and delivered, so delivered services here. These are all the services that were delivered to Chad, and these are those predictive ones because he hasn't actually requested anything. So we know based on his role, this is what he's gotten. And then we can also go back and look at every transaction that's ever occurred under his user. So if he had requested something, it's going to show up in here. If we had automatically provisioned it to him, it's going to show up in here. And you can search off of not just users, you could search off of a service delivery. So Google Chrome, it could display everyone who's ever requested that, as well as it getting returned as well. So.
Okay, next question was in the licensing side of it, how is it added or decreased from the pool? Is it by user or by device?
So again, a lot of different options there. So when you configure a service, you can actually put a limit on the number of service deliveries. So if you've got Visio out there and you've only got 50 licenses of Visio, you could put a limit on the delivery of that service to 50, and then trigger an automation job to notify someone when the 51st person requests it. But if one of those people gets let go or retires or changes job roles and no longer entitled to it, as soon as that service gets returned, then that service delivery count would decrement down to 49, and there's another one available. If you're working off of like a different license model, you can have automation actually query, for instance, Dell and use their web API and say, hey, we've got 3,600 of these available licenses and someone else just requested it. And then you could notify maybe the purchasing agent, and they could say, hey, we've gotten 10 more of these requests in the last 6 hours. I think we should increase our license count for this resource that keeps getting requested.
Okay, a couple more questions, and then we'll probably have to be done. But does this come with a blank slate as far as workflows, or are there example workflows that they can just change the values and build out? And is there a sandbox environment for them to play with, or a way for them to set up a trial locally?
Yes, yes, and yes. So there's definitely sandboxes available, and all of these services are exportable via XML. So there's a Ivanti community site where people will upload sample services that get very complex as well as very simple, and you can share them, you can export them, you can edit the export as well.
Okay. And they can get a trial to set it up locally, or is that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then last question is, does it show any possible SOD violation?
SOD, I'm not familiar with that one.
I'm not familiar with it either, so but maybe it's standard operating procedure kind of thing where they're violating against what the standard should be.
So if you configured your organizational structure to kind of map to like a violation, then absolutely. You could pull up Chad Johnson here and look at his, organizational configuration, and it would show something that he's not supposed to be in, and then you could trigger workflows off of that violation as well. Maybe notify someone, or maybe remove his access to the internet or something.
Yeah, segregation of duties, right? So that making sure that people don't, an example is I can't submit a change and approve a change at the same time, right?
Correct. Yeah. If you're in Group A, then you're not allowed to access anything that is allocated to Group B. Things like that. Absolutely. There's a lot of and, ors, and all the rules must apply in the qualification criteria fields.
Well, thank you very much, Robbie. I really appreciate your time. If anyone has any additional questions or anything, my email address is bhoskins@ncsi.us, and our phone number is there. Feel free to send me an email with anything, and we can follow up separately in the future. Thanks everyone for your time today. Thank you, Robbie, again for everything that you've done, and appreciate it. We will look forward to seeing everyone at our next webinar. Thank you very much.